Hey everyone, welcome to the Point Mechanic channel. My name is Beacon, and today's video is a reboot of, I think, probably the first video I ever put out, which is a PodMod build tutorial. Over the years, I've learned a lot of new techniques, and I wanted to put all that information into a much better video. This is going to be a pretty long one, though, so if you want to skip ahead, you can look in the video description below. I've left timestamps, and it'll help you skip ahead to that section. Now, I've been doing these videos for quite a few years, and I really enjoyed doing them. I've always wanted to give out the information for free, but I decided I was going to set up a link, which is in the video description, and it'll help you contribute if you feel so inclined. Now, your contributions will be going towards more things like build videos, flow videos, trick tutorials, review videos, and then hopefully in the future, I'll be doing some more artistic projects where I'll be filming flow artists in their flow state and interviewing them about the flow. So if you want to contribute to that, any amount will be so gratefully appreciated. Thank you so very much for watching, and let's get started. All right, let's first talk about the different types of heads there are to choose from. There's quite a few of them out there, and I don't have them all in front of me, including the first one, which is the Emoja head from Lanternsmith. It's what Flowtoys sells as their light-up contact poi sets. And I'm not a fan of those just because they are too small. They're 90 millimeters. They're too light. And the main complaint I have is the capsule sticks out the back of the head. And you know, when it sticks out about that much and you're doing cradle moves, I feel that on the back of my hand. So I'm not a fan of that one at all. I started off with the Mr. Babosh. These are 100 millimeter heads. This is the heads I used in my first PodMod video. They worked out good for a while, but you know, after doing a lot of spinning, especially doing heavy orbitals and stalls and you know moves that take a lot of centrifugal force, it makes the head elongate like that, which creates an issue because the capsule will pop out into the inside of the head. You have to stop spinning and then kind of readjust it. And so I eventually switched over to the 97 millimeter heads that Flow on Fire sells. These are probably the most popular ones out there if I had to take a guess. These were good because they have a little sleeve that goes around the capsule and it goes about that far down into the head. And it keeps the capsule in place, and even if this elongates, it doesn't pop off onto the inside. It always goes right back into where it should. What I don't like about these is the size, 97 millimeters. I usually spin the 100 mils, but they also make the head a little bit elongated. I'm sure if you adjust the backside of the capsule by shaping it down, you can probably get it so it looks perfectly round, but I'm not 100% sure. There's a couple options. When I first started off, I had the capsule going in this side, and then the button was just kind of concealed back here, and you have to really press hard to get it to press. The problem with that is, though, after a while, this started just to stretch out, especially when you get a lot of dust and stuff in there, and the capsule wants to pull out. So if you're going to go with this option, have the button on one side and the rope on the other. Some people do use these with the rope in the center right here and the capsule right this way. I don't have a mod on that because I'm not a big fan of that option, but that's really only if you're going to be using like the bigger rope that don't fit inside the capsules. I eventually switched to what I'm using now, which is the 200 gram 100 millimeter hard glow heads from Flow on Fire. I say 200 grams, but they actually fluctuate quite a bit. The manufacturer gets them down all the way to like maybe 190 up to 210, something like that. I like these because they're a thicker wall, which keeps the capsule from popping out on the inside. That being said, though, the most recent batch that I got, they did pop out on the inside, and what I mean by that is you really pull it, it goes like that. And I'm not a fan of that, but I think, you know, that some batches you get like that, and especially if you get with the lighter ones. So get the heavier ones if you can. My other two sets that I have of these, they have never had that problem whatsoever. So, but they're great because they're a denser and heavier ball, so they do contact really well. I have a review on all these. Some of my personal opinions on them have changed over the years, but you can check those out on my YouTube channel. And yeah, that's it on the heads. Let's get on to capsules. So the Flowtoys capsules originally came in what's called a short shell. They now sell them in the long shell, which is about a 1/4 inch or so longer. The originals fit perfectly inside of a 100 millimeter head without having to adjust the length, and it makes it so the button fits flush. But since these are now getting hard to find, people are modifying their long shells to be the same length as the short shell. The problem with that, though, is if you cut that much off of it, you're losing this space right here, which is needed to create a puck on the end of your rope. So if you have a modified long shell or a short shell, you now have to fit the puck between this ring right here and the battery, which means it has to be pretty thin like that. But Sergio Medina here at Lost in Flow decided to create this nifty little 3D printed ring. And what's neat about this is you can take the ring, it's on the inside of this head here, and it slides over the capsule and it keeps the capsule from pulling out. This is the button side, which still sits flush, and this is the rope side. So now all you have to do is throw a rope in there, or if you need, you can drill this out and put a bigger rope in there with a cap on it, and that keeps you from having to cut everything down. In this video, though, I'm going to make the original style, which was with the short shell, and that's because I'm saving my long shell to put inside of our new handle here. This is a 3D printed handle with a elastomer tubing on it, which makes it nice and grippy. It's a bit heavier than the current 3D printed capsule handles from Flowtoys, and it just feels really amazing in your hands. This one's actually going to have a bearing in it, but we do sell one that is going to be a little bit shorter than that. So we'll be selling these in the future. Keep an eye out for that. So what I want to do now is to get a hole on both sides of the head, and I want to make sure that they are aligned. So the way I do that is I look for the seam, and it's a very fine seam, but once you find it, get a small, like 1/16 inch drill bit or so, and then go right on the seam and then drill a hole into it. And then I got a piece of wire. I bent it at a 90 degree. I stuck that wire in the hole. Now the seam is running this way, but I'm going to run the wire this way. And when I find the seam on the other side, I will mark the wire somehow. And in this case, I bent it up. And then I'm going to turn the wire so that it's running with the seam. And then look for that 90 degree and then mark it. And I've already marked this one, but then I'll turn it 180 degrees and make sure that the mark is still the same, and it is. So now I'm ready to drill this side. And on this side, I want to drill a 3/8 inch rope hole. If you're using a, the long shell, you're going to want to do a 11/16 inch on both sides. But in this case, I'm using the short shell, so I'm going to do my 3/8 inch hole first, because that's the size rope that I'm using. Now, in the past, I've used drill bits, and I've used like multiple sizes till I get up to that 3/8 inch size. Because if you do a 3/8 inch drill bit right off the bat, it can really mar the surface, and it might not be that good of a hole. So I recommend going up in steps, or better yet, if you can find one of these, this will do the job perfectly. This is called a brad point bit. And as you can see there, the edge of the bit starts to cut first. If you're looking for these, make sure you don't find one with a screw point, because that will screw things up, because it'll auger into the bit too quick, or into the head too quick. So find one with just a solid point like that. Got right on that mark that I made, and then I'm going to start going in. Now, don't press too hard, because if you press too hard, it kind of dimples the ball, and then when you finally got through, you'll have a kind of a cone-shaped hole. So start off with a fast speed and just go in slow, and it does pretty quick job at it. And there you go, perfect hole. Now on the other side, I'm still going to do this 3/8 hole, but I'm only using that to start it off for a bigger hole that I'm going to be putting. So I'm going to use this same bit, and I'm going to use one of these. These are called step bits. You can get these at Ace Hardware, or if you have a Harbor Freight nearby, they're a lot cheaper there. And I'm going to use the 11/16 inch notch, which should be marked right there. Now, as you can see, it only cuts about that much into each hole. And your ball might be thicker, especially at the seam, than that. So when you're going in, only go in till the next step part right there, which is, it's going to bottom out on the 3/4 inch size hole, and then stop. And it's not going to be pretty inside there, but I'll show you how to clean that up. Okay, and as you see, it's not 100% pretty inside there. It's barely got a little bit of material holding on there. So sometimes you can just, scrape it off with your fingernail or something. But if you really want to get it clean, you can use, I use a Dremel with a barrel sander on the end. I forget what size this is, but it fits in there absolutely perfect. So I'll have mine on maybe a 2 or 2.5 speed. Start it up and then stick it in. And that gives me a perfect hole. Now, something I would say not to do, I don't know if you noticed that there, is when I did that, I didn't have it perfectly aligned and it wanted to walk on the outside. That can screw up your surface. So if you have a powerful enough drill or Dremel, you can stick this in there just a little bit and then start it up. But if it's not turned up to the right speed, it might not actually turn on. So have it turned up a little higher and then go in like that. Okay, the next thing we need to do is to drill out the rope hole to be able to fit the size rope that you have. I use a 3/8 inch rope, so that's the size I'm going up to. So let's disassemble our capsule. You're not going to be using this ring or this ring to do the PodMod anymore. So you can take that off and grab right here and pull out. If you're having a hard time getting that out, what I found to do is to take needle nose or something and put it on both sides and then pull out like that. Should work just fine. Now make sure you pay attention to which side you're doing, because you could do the button side on accident. I've done that and kind of screw things up. So when you're drilling this out, you'll want to make sure to hold it really tight, or have like some tape, or in this case something like this over it, and tighten it down. If you don't have this on there, then a lot of times the drill bit will make this want to spread out. Now you can do this with a regular drill bit, but I don't recommend it because it can get pretty chewed up. If you have a Dremel, you could use that. I use this step bit for this process as well, and I'm going to go out to 3/8 of an inch. And there you go. Now, you'll notice that if you use something like this, or even a Dremel, a lot of times it will create a little lip on the inside right here. So, take a Dremel or something, or a Dremel, but a X-Acto or something, and kind of take that off, because it can take away the room that you need to be able to put a cap on your rope. And that lip is going to be sticking this way. Don't cut into the actual plastic. This is just kind of melted plastic that needs to be taken off right there. Now, something to note on the long shells are that the original long shells, if I remember right anyways, had this piece of plastic came all the way out here to create the circle. And so it was just hanging on one side. And if that's the case, I don't know how well this would work, because you're really making it a lot thinner and it's not both sides that's holding it on. So I'd probably recommend getting the newer capsule. Also, when you're using this, make sure to use it at a pretty high speed. That way it can get through it cleaner and quicker. Like that. You could also keep this put together and use the X-Acto on it. It actually is a lot easier than the way I was just doing it on the short shells if you do it this way. Done. All right, let's talk about rope preparation. You're going to want to put a cap on the end of your rope somehow, and that's to keep it on the inside of the capsule. If you're using a natural fiber like cotton, you're going to want to use either a epoxy or glue to put the cap on. If you're using a synthetic rope, some synthetic ropes will actually melt together. This I think is probably a nylon rope here, and it melts probably the best. Nylon and polypropylene melt well. If you're using a rope that's got like a polyester jacket and a nylon core, sometimes you can get them to bond. I tried that with this one. It didn't bond the best, but it definitely would do the job. If you're using something like the VPC, which is what I use, it has a polyester jacket and it has a Vectrin core. The Vectrin core melts at a lower temperature versus the jacket. So that means you're gonna have to bond this together with an epoxy. Now I use this 5-minute epoxy from DevCon Home. I get it at Ace Hardware. It's the clear non-gel version. You can use other products as well, but some of them don't bond very well to things like polypropylene. So you'll want to make sure that it works well. This stuff has worked with everything that I've tried it on. So I'm going to show you first off how to melt the rope. Okay, as you see here, I've put a piece of electrical tape on there. I've wrapped it tight, and the reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to cut it with a razor blade. Certain ropes cut okay with scissors, but certain ropes don't. If you do this method and use the razor blade, it will work quite well. I'm going to take another piece of tape and put it right up next to the other and wrap it around a couple times. I'm then going to take the razor blade and cut about 1/4 inch up from this tape right here. Then take the tape off, and that's left your rope like that. Now you got to melt this, and it's better to probably use a lighter if you can, but if you have a torch and you're quick with it, you can make it work. The thing you want to avoid is to get this too hot, because if it starts to get like bubbly or too black, a lot of times it means that it's melting too much and it gets to almost the carbon state, and then it will disintegrate. So be very careful, and I would say rotate. I start on the outer fibers first to get those matted together, and then you can go to the inner fibers. And you might have to go over this a couple times. And then take a flat metal object and then press it into that. And there you go. It's not the prettiest, but you can then go like that, and I would have your capsule nearby, one that's already been prepared, and then press it in on both sides like that, and that's to get it to form. Just be careful. I'd recommend using gloves so you don't burn yourself. So that's how you do that. Now let's talk about like a VPC and how to prepare it. All right, both of these methods are definitely messy, so be careful. Use gloves. All right, so first of all, I'm going to use this short shell capsule as a mold, and I'm going to use some chapstick and a Q-tip, and I'm just going to coat this whole rope side of the case, right where the epoxy is going to get. If the epoxy could possibly get on that, make sure to cover it. And especially right here where the halves meet, I want to make sure that that is coated as well. You don't want to have so much that you have glob sticking up. Just a light film will work. Next, you're going to want to prepare your rope. I wrap this with electric tape. I wrapped this with electric tape as well, right where that was, and then I cut this with a razor blade, and then you peel the tape off, and it should leave you about 1/4 inch of rope or more. Now, if your jacket, or let's see, your core, I should say, is too far down, like that one kind of is right there, way to fix that is to pinch right down here and then push like this until the core comes out and gets even, and then pinch right here and then smooth it out like that. So what I'm going to do is mix up some of this epoxy. I use these old dish soap measuring cups. They work great for this. A nice amount in there, and start mixing. You want to make sure that you mix really well, because if you don't, since it is a two-part epoxy, if it's not mixed perfectly, you'll have little soft spots or sticky spots and things that don't harden. So I'll mix it a few times, wipe off the edges to make sure that there's nothing sticking to that and it doesn't get mixed, and do that again. And then I am going to first get the outside fibers, because this is really important. If you don't get the outside fibers, once this all hardens, you might have a frayed strand sticking out and it will want to unravel. So then I'm going to get the inner fibers, and you can just dip that if you want. Have a sharp or pointy stick, toothpick or a paper clip or something handy, and then you're going to stab this over and over, and that's getting the inner and outer fibers bonded. If you get some on this tape here, don't worry, because you can wipe it off. And it actually doesn't hurt to get tape further down on the rope, just in case you get some of this on it. Okay, I'm going to dip this one more time and then press down, and that should flare those out a little bit. Then take your case and stick this in there. If you didn't get your tape wrapped up on there tight enough, it might be hard to get this case to close, so definitely get it nice and tight. And if there is a little gap right there, once you get it in there, just kind of twist the rope and it should close. And you can kind of see through there as a window, and I know the battery is probably going to sit a little bit closer to this side, so I need to be able to pull that cap down just a little bit to make room for the battery. And now I'm going to let that harden, and I should have a perfect cap on the end. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes now, and this is not tacky anymore, not very tacky. So I'm going to take this off. I use a hose clamp on here. It makes it nice so you don't have to hold it for the 5 minutes. And start to peel this off or separate this. If it sticks a little bit, just let it maybe harden a little bit more, than it should pop right out. Now, as you can see, that doesn't look all that clean, but that's fine, because since we did it at the 5-minute mark, I can now come in here with a razor blade, and it's still just soft enough that I can trim this up and make it look exactly how I want it. So now it's flat on that side, and I might have deformed it just a tad bit because it was still a little soft. So what I'm going to do is stick this back right there, and then just twist this to make sure that it's perfectly round. And now would be a good time to take this tape off. And there you go. Now I'm going to take my capsule and put it right there. Just make sure that that fits good, and it does. So that's about the amount that you want to have inside the capsule. If you go too dang tight, then it can risk pinching the wires there between the board and the battery, so do be careful. So we've created these dish-shaped rings that go over your rope, and what those do is they act as a mold for the cap on the end of your rope. So you slide that over your rope, and then you're going to want to get this rope cut straight. So use a razor blade, tighten that down really tight with electrical tape, cut it straight up and down, and then you're going to slide the ring up. A lot of times what that does, though, is it pulls that inner core a little too far down, and you want to make sure the fibers are even. So what I recommend doing is pinching right here, or let's see, pinching down here, and then lightly sliding this down, and that will bring it up to the surface. Now I got to take the tape off, and I am ready to apply some epoxy. Now this stuff is messy. Use gloves, and it's best to put tape on the back side here if you think you might get epoxy on that, because that happens if you're not careful. So it's really important that you get these outer fibers really covered. And you know what, I should have probably had the ring just a tiny bit down so I can really get on the side of the fibers, but I'll do my best to make it work, because you can slide the ring up afterwards. So I've got that covered pretty good. And honestly, if I just left it like that, at that length, it would probably work good for the long capsules. I've got a sharp stick here, and I'm going to poke it like that, over and over. And this is getting the inner and outer fibers bonded together. Going to now dip this again and do that again. Now this has a 5-minute set time. Takes maybe 10 minutes to get to the hardened state. Probably actually less than that. So you got to be somewhat fast with this. And one more dip. Okay. Now you got to be really careful. If you're going to slide this ring down, you want to make sure not to do it too far, because if you do, it's going to slide right off and be a problem. Okay, got it about right where I want it. There's a little bit of an excess epoxy built up there, and it's a good time just to scrape it off. Okay, so after I've trimmed that up, it looks the way I want it to, and I'll stick it in the back side of that capsule there, and it is a tight fit, but it should fit in there nicely. Okay, and here is the last method that I use. I had an old short shell laying around, so I just cut that in half, and I'm gonna now use this as a mold. So I've prepared my rope already, and I've coated this with the chapstick, and I'm now gonna stick this in here. And I'm gonna give it a little twist to make sure that the halves are meeting up just fine. And then I'm gonna use my hose clamp. Bring that down low. Tighten it. And as you can see, I now have the fiber sticking out on the inside. Now I'm going to mix this up again and put it on there. And on this, it's the same. You got to make sure to get the fibers on the outside and the inside bonded together really well. I made this one especially messy just to show you how easily this stuff cuts once you take it off. And this is, as I said, around the 5-minute mark that you're able to continue to cut it with a razor blade. After that, it gets definitely a bit harder. What I like about this method is that it forms perfectly to the back side of that capsule, so it's the best fit that you can possibly get. And just like that, it fits like a glove. Now, as you can see right here, I've got some floss on there. And the reason I did that is because after you use this a bit, it wants to make the fibers swell up a little bit, which oftentimes will get pinched in between the cases. And if you're using a bigger rope than I'm using right here, you really need to tighten it down so that you can get the case to close. So just get some floss, tie a couple knots in it, and then leave a tail so that you can hold on to the tail like right here. And then start wrapping it and get it super, super tight. Go all the way down and then all the way back up. Tie the knot off, and then you'll have these little tails left, and just hit that with a lighter and then smash that into the floss, and that should be good enough for the life of the rope. So stick that in there, and no closing issues. So because of the inside of this shape, if you do the last method that I used here, it creates kind of like a cone shape because it perfectly forms to the inside of the case, and that will create an issue that when you're spinning, sometimes the cone wants to make this whole thing spread apart. So having a, one of those white rubber band things on here doesn't work to hold it in as good as I'd like. So I started using annealed wire, and you use the annealed stuff just because it, it's nice and flexible, and you can fold it over and twist it without it wanting to break like a lot of wires. This is a bit heavier than the stuff I usually use, but I can't find my other stuff. But you basically just go like that, and then you're going to cut this off, and you're going to have a little tail sticking out like that, and you want to just fold the tail over and try to get the tail inside that little groove right there. That way you're not damaging the ball when you're sliding it in. So when you press this in, you'll notice that it wants to make the ball concave. So have your other hand back here working it like this, and you're going to get to a point where it bottoms out. And the way to fix that is put your hands right here, press, and then pull. Now, as far as the handles go, I've got quite a few different videos you can look for, including how to attach ultra knobs, capsule handles, play knobs, different things like that. And I'll even show you how to use hot glue in certain cases. If you're doing this, I recommend doing the head first and then do the handle last, because that makes it a lot easier to get the overall length down. If you're using a rope like the VPC that I have here, or another rope like it where it has a core and a jacket, you can adjust how stiff or how sloppy it is. I like mine extra stiff, so what I'll do is I'll grab the other end, the core, and pull it, and then pull the head, and so that stretches it out nice and tight. And then if you have an extra hand or somebody else that can hold this, just have them hold the core, and then what you're going to do is keep tension on this end, grab the rope here, and then slide your hand down it, and that's going to get the jacket nice and tight to the core. Then tape it really tight so that it holds tension on it, and that should keep your rope nice and stiff, and then finish it off with whatever method you use. Anyways, I hope this has helped some people out. If you have any comments or questions, leave it in the comment section below. If you have any other suggestions on how to do this, I am all ears. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone, and have a good one.